Mark, chapter 14. It was now 2 days before Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread. The chief priests and the religious leaders were trying to find a surreptitious way to arrest Jesus and have him killed. But not during Passover, they said to themselves, otherwise the people may riot. Meanwhile, Jesus was in Bethany, eating a meal at Simon the leper's home. A woman came in with an alabaster jar of very expensive pure nard perfume. She broke the jar open and poured the perfume on Jesus' head. Some of those who were there became annoyed and said, "Why waste this perfume? It could have been sold for a year's wages and the money given to the poor." They were angry with her. But Jesus replied, "Leave her alone. Why are you criticizing her for doing something beautiful to me? You'll always have the poor with you, and you can help them whenever you want. But you won't always have me with you. She did what she could. She anointed my body in anticipation of my burial. I tell you the truth, wherever the good news is spread in the world, people will remember what she did." Then Judas Iscariot, one of the 12 disciples, went to the chief priests and arranged to betray Jesus to them. When they heard this, they were delighted and promised to pay him. So Judas began to look for an opportunity to betray Jesus. On the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the time when the Passover lamb is sacrificed, Jesus' disciples asked him, "Where do you want us to go and prepare the Passover meal for you?" He sent 2 of his disciples, telling them, "Go into the city and there you'll meet a man carrying a water pot. Follow him. And when he goes into a house, ask the owner where I and my disciples can celebrate the Passover. He will take you to a large upstairs room that is furnished and ready. You can make preparations for us there." The disciples went into the city and found things just as he described them. They prepared the Passover meal. In the evening, Jesus went there with the 12 disciples. While they were sitting eating, Jesus said, "I tell you the truth, one of you is going to betray me, one who is eating with me now." They were shocked, and they each asked, "It's not me, is it?" "It's one of the 12, one of you sharing this food with me," he replied. "The Son of Man will die, just as the scriptures predicted. But how terrible it will be for the man who betrays the Son of Man. It would be better for that man if he'd never been born." As they were eating, Jesus picked up some bread. He blessed it and gave it to them. "Take it. This is my body," he told them. Then he picked up the cup. He blessed it and gave it to them. They all drank from it. "This is my blood," he told them, "the agreement that's being poured out for many. I tell you the truth, I won't drink of the fruit of the vine until the day I drink it fresh in God's kingdom." After they had sung a psalm, they left for the Mount of Olives. "All of you will abandon me," Jesus told them. "For as the scriptures say, I will attack the shepherd, and the sheep will be completely scattered. But after I have risen from the dead, I will go before you to Galilee." "I won't abandon you even if everyone else does," Peter replied. Jesus answered him, "I tell you the truth that today, this very night, before the rooster crows twice, you will deny that you even know me 3 times." But Peter was totally adamant, saying, "Even if I have to die with you, I will never deny you." All of them said the same. They arrived at a place called Gethsemane, where Jesus told his disciples, "Sit here while I go and pray." He took Peter, James, and John with him. He began to be very disturbed and troubled. Jesus told them, "My agony is so painful it feels like I'm dying. Please, remain here and stay awake." He went a little farther on and then fell to the ground. He prayed, asking to be spared the time that was coming, if it were possible. "Abba, Father, you can do everything," he said. "Please, take this cup of suffering away from me. Yet it's not what I want, but what you want." Then Jesus returned and found the disciples asleep. "Simon, are you sleeping?" he asked Peter. "Couldn't you stay awake for just an hour? Stay awake and pray so you won't fall into temptation. The spirit is willing, but the body is weak." He left them once more and prayed, saying the same things. Then he returned, and again he found them sleeping because they couldn't keep their eyes open. They didn't know what to say. He returned a 3rd time and asked them, "Are you still asleep? Are you still resting? Well, that's enough, because the time has come. Look, the Son of Man is about to be betrayed into the hands of sinners. Get up. Let's go. See, here comes my betrayer." Just as he was saying this, Judas, one of the 12 disciples, arrived with a mob carrying swords and clubs, sent by the chief priests, religious leaders, and elders. Now the betrayer had arranged a sign with them, "He's the one that I kiss. Arrest him and take him away under guard." Judas went right up to Jesus. "Rabbi," he said, and kissed him affectionately. So they grabbed hold of Jesus and arrested him. But one of those standing there pulled out his sword and struck the high priest's servant, cutting off his ear. "Am I some kind of rebel that you have come to arrest me with swords and clubs?" Jesus asked them. "I was there with you, teaching in the temple every day. Why didn't you arrest me then? But this is happening to fulfill the scriptures." Then all Jesus' disciples deserted him and ran away. One of his followers was a young man who was wearing only a linen garment. They seized hold of him, but he ran off naked, leaving the garment behind. They took Jesus to the high priest's house where all the chief priests, elders, and religious teachers had gathered. Peter followed him at a distance and went into the courtyard of the high priest's house. He sat down with the guards and warmed himself by the fire. Inside, the chief priests and the whole governing council were trying to find some evidence to have Jesus put to death, but they couldn't find anything. Many were giving false testimony against him, but their statements didn't agree. Some of them got up to speak falsely against Jesus. "We heard him say, 'I will destroy this temple that human hands built, and in 3 days I will build another without hands.' But even so, their testimony didn't agree. Then the high priest stood up in front of the council and asked Jesus, 'Have you nothing to say in response to these charges made against you?' But Jesus remained silent and didn't answer. So the high priest asked again, 'Are you the Messiah, the Son of the Blessed One?' 'I am,' Jesus replied, 'and you will see the Son of Man sitting on the right of the Mighty One and coming with the clouds of heaven.' The high priest tore his clothes and asked, 'Why do we need any more witnesses? You have heard the blasphemy. What's your reaction?' They all found him guilty and condemned him to death. Then some of them began to spit on him. They blindfolded him, hit him with their fists, and said, 'Why don't you prophesy then, you prophet?' The guards took him away and beat him up. Meanwhile, Peter was down below in the courtyard. One of the high priest's servant girls passed by, and seeing Peter warming himself, looked straight at him and said, 'You were with Jesus of Nazareth too.' But he denied it. 'I don't know what you're talking about or what you mean,' he replied. Then he went out to the forecourt, and a rooster crowed. Seeing him there, the servant girl repeated to those standing around, 'This man is one of them.' Once more Peter denied it. A little while later they said to Peter again, 'You're definitely one of them because you're a Galilean too.' Peter began calling down curses on himself, and he swore, 'I don't know this man who you're talking about.' Immediately the rooster crowed the second time. Then Peter remembered what Jesus had said to him, 'Before the rooster crows twice, you will deny me 3 times. When he realized what he'd done, he burst into tears. Mark chapter 15. Early the next morning, the chief priest, elders, and religious teachers, the whole governing council, came to a decision. They had Jesus bound and sent him to be handed over to Pilate. Pilate asked him, 'Are you the king of the Jews?' 'You said it,' Jesus replied. The chief priests kept on making many accusations against him. Pilate questioned him again, 'Aren't you going to answer? See how many charges they're bringing against you.' But Jesus didn't give any more answers, much to Pilate's surprise. Now it was Pilate's custom at the Passover feast to release a prisoner to the people, whoever they requested. One of the prisoners was a man called Barabbas who belonged to a group of rebels who had committed murder during an uprising. The crowd went to Pilate and asked him to release a prisoner following his usual custom. 'Do you want me to release to you the King of Jews?' he asked them. For he realized that it was because of their jealousy of Jesus that the chief priests had handed Jesus over to him. But the chief priests stirred up the crowd to have him release Barabbas to them instead. 'Then what should I do with the one you call the King of the Jews?' he asked them. "Crucify him," they shouted back. "Why? What crime has he committed?" Pilate asked them. "Crucify him," they shouted back even louder. Wanting to please the mob, Pilate released Barabbas to them. First he had Jesus flogged and then handed him over to be crucified. The soldiers took him away into the Praetorium courtyard, where they called out the whole cohort. They put royal purple robes on him and made a crown of thorns that they placed on him. Then they saluted him, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews!" They repeatedly beat him around the head with a rod, spat at him, and fell on their knees before him as if in worship. After they finished mocking him, they took off the purple robes and put his own clothes back on him. Then they led him away to be crucified. They forced a passerby, Simon of Cyrene, who was coming from the countryside, to carry his cross. Simon was the father of Alexander and Rufus. They brought Jesus to the place called Golgotha, which means the place of the skull. They offered him wine mixed with myrrh, but he refused it. Then they crucified him. They divided his clothes and threw dice to decide who would have what. It was 9 a.m. when they crucified him. A sign with the written charge against him read, "The King of the Jews." They crucified 2 criminals with him, one on his left and one on his right. People passing by shouted insults at him, shaking their heads and saying, "Aha! You who claimed you were going to destroy the temple and rebuild it in 3 days. Save yourself and come down from the cross." Likewise, the chief priests and the religious teachers made fun of him, saying to each other, "He saved others, but he can't save himself. If he really is the Messiah, the King of Israel, then why doesn't he come down from the cross so we can see and believe?" Even those who were crucified with him insulted him. At noon, darkness fell over the whole land until 3 in the afternoon. At 3 o'clock, Jesus cried out, "Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani," which means, my God, why have you abandoned me?" Some of those standing there heard this and said, "He's calling for Elijah." One man ran and filled a sponge with vinegar, put it on a stick, and tried to give it to Jesus to drink. "Leave him alone," he said. "Let's see if Elijah will come to take him down." Then Jesus groaned loudly and died. The temple veil was ripped in 2 from top to bottom. When the centurion standing there in front of Jesus saw how he died, he said, "This man was truly the Son of God." Some women were watching from a distance, including Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James the Younger and Joses, and Salome. They had followed Jesus and had taken care of him while he was in Galilee. Many other women who had come with him to Jerusalem were also there. It was Friday, the day before the Sabbath. When evening came, Joseph of Arimathea, a member of the governing council who was himself waiting for the kingdom of God, had the courage to go to Pilate and ask for Jesus' body. Pilate was surprised that Jesus had died so soon, so he summoned the centurion and asked him if Jesus had already died. Once he had confirmation from the centurion, Pilate gave permission for Joseph to take the body. Joseph bought a linen sheet. Then he took Jesus' body down from the cross and wrapped it in the sheet and placed it in a tomb that had been cut out of rock. Then he rolled a heavy stone up against the entrance. Mary Magdalene and Mary the mother of Joses were watching where he was laid. Mark chapter 16. Once the Sabbath had ended, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome bought aromatic ointments so that they could go and anoint Jesus' body. Very early Sunday morning, just at sunrise, they went to the tomb. They were asking each other, "Who will roll away the stone for us from the entrance to the tomb?" But when they arrived and looked, they saw that the very large, heavy stone had already been rolled away. When they went into the tomb, they saw a young man sitting on the right, wearing a long white robe. They became very frightened. "Don't be frightened," he told them. "You are looking for Jesus the Nazarene, the one who was crucified. He is risen from the dead. He is not here. Look, this is the place where they laid him to rest. Now go and tell his disciples and Peter that he's going ahead of you to Galilee. You will see him there just as he told you." They left and ran from the tomb, shaking and confused. They said nothing to anyone because they were too scared. When Jesus rose from the dead on Sunday morning, he appeared first of all to Mary Magdalene, from whom he'd driven out 7 demons. She went and told those who had been with him as they mourned and cried. When they heard that Jesus was alive and that she had seen him, they didn't believe it. Later, Jesus appeared in a different form to 2 other disciples who'd left to go to the countryside. They returned and told the others, but they didn't believe them either. After this, he appeared to the 11 disciples as they were eating. He rebuked them for their lack of trust and their stubbornness, because they had not believed those who'd seen him after he had risen. Then he told them, "Go to the whole world and announce the good news to everyone. Anyone who trusts in me and is baptized will be saved, but anyone who chooses not to trust will be condemned. The following signs will accompany those who trust in me. In my name they will drive out demons, they will speak new languages. They will be able to handle snakes. If they drink something poisonous, they won't be harmed. They will place their hands on the sick and they will be healed." Then, the Lord Jesus, when he had finished speaking to them, was taken up into heaven, where he sat down at the right hand of God. The disciples went out and spread the good news everywhere, and the Lord worked with them, confirming the message through miraculous signs that accompanied it.